Hey, bestie, let me ask you something real. How many times have you said yes when you absolutely everything in you wanted to say no because you didn't want to disappoint someone, because you didn't want them to think that you were mean or selfish or difficult? But let me tell you this, saying yes to everyone else at the expense of saying no to yourself is not kindness, it's self abandonment. I know you get that. Internally, you get it. Today, we're going to talk about how to break free from this whole people pleasing thing and reclaim your voice. Because if you feel like you can't say no, then your yes has no weight at all. That your no can be just as powerful, kind, and aligned as your yes. You just have to use it. So let's talk about that. A lot of times people pleasing may look like generosity, but underneath, it's often fear based, driven by limiting beliefs, unprocessed emotions, old patterns that say, well, if I say no, I'll be rejected. I won't be enough. I'll be alone. And if you've ever said that, if you've ever felt like I have to say yes, like that you just have that guilt, you feel bad saying no, but then you resent yourself or resent the person that you said yes to because you wanted to say no. And then you're harboring all these negative feelings about them that a lot of times they don't even know about because you just didn't say no. I bet you'd love to do that, wouldn't you? Just say no. Yeah. So you hear me talk about mental and emotional release from time to time. And we know that people pleasing gets rooted in unresolved emotions, beliefs about ourselves. NLP tells us we're just sort of running the strategy that we've practiced and reinforced over time. And also, when all of this is happening, what happens is lots of happens there is that we stop respecting ourselves, that we start allowing ourselves to be run over and then wondering why people keep doing it to us. It's almost like we're putting something out in the world that we keep seeming to get back. So let's talk about a little bit of what people pleasing is versus what it isn't. People pleasing is a strategy. It's not who you are, it's a learned pattern of self protection. You learned to make others comfortable so that you could feel safe. It's not kindness. True kindness considers both you and the other person. People pleasing sacrifices one for the other. And like I said before, the reality is that the more that we do that, the more we start to grow with negative emotions about ourselves or the others. And a lot of times it's driven by external validation and fear of disconnection. And this creates chronic stress, emotional exhaustion, and there's that R word again, resentment. Resentment of ourselves, resentment of others. Saying no doesn't make you rude, selfish, or unkind. It makes you honest, self aware, and free. I would actually even argue that saying yes when you want to say no is actually unkind. One, for sure, it's unkind for to yourself, but also it's unkind to the other person because, again, you end up doing something half-heartedly. You end up showing up half of your best self, or you're like, oh, I'm going to be the most excellent, perfect, whatever version of me. But then you're doing it with all of these negative emotions internally. And while maybe someone doesn't pick up on that, Your internal self does. And those emotions, by the way, get stored in our body. We want to avoid this like the plague. I don't know about you, but I do not want negative emotions stored in my body. Therefore, I need to process them and create environments where I'm personally not creating them to exist in me. So let's talk about how you do undo this thing of people pleasing. So, first, you have to identify the pattern. You need to ask yourself, when do I say yes, even when I don't want to? What emotion shows up before the yes comes out of my mouth? Is it fear, guilt, anxiety? You need to reflect, look into you, and find out what's happening. Because a lot of times it's so fascinating. We will do things to avoid the guilt and then feel guilt that we did it, or feel guilt, I don't want to feel bad that I said no to this person. I'll just feel so guilty. And then we do it and they're like, oh, I feel so guilty that I said yes when I didn't want to, or you're doing something and you have all this anxiety. Yeah. If this is you, you know I'm talking to you. Yeah. Next, you need to release any emotional baggage. Maybe you do this in therapy. Maybe you come to a breakthrough session, but you have to release the baggage. Most people pleasers carry unresolved guilt or fear of abandonment. And this comes often from childhood where love was conditional, where you might have been rejected if you spoke up. Sort of this internal belief that your worth is tied to being seen and not heard, that you need to be useful, quiet, or agreeable. It's like little girls are so kind. It's like parents sometimes inadvertently, not on purpose, create these little kiddos who are just complicit with anything that anyone ever asked them to do because they're supposed to be kind and agreeable. So maybe you have some beliefs, some negative emotions that are tied to this. You've got to get rid of them because they're not serving you. And by the way, you wouldn't still be listening anyways if they were serving you. And then you need to challenge the belief behind the pattern. I used to have this in my own life where I would feel guilty for saying no, or if someone asked me to serve and I didn't do it, or someone I don't know, they wanted me to come to a party or this social event and I would say yes when really I wanted to say no. One, I'm an introvert. At some point, I get to like a limit with people. Not that I don't like and enjoy them, but where my energy tank needs to be recharged. And so I would find, especially earlier on in my life, where I was working these long days and just feeling like, well, anything that anybody ever asked me to do, I needed to do it. So I had some beliefs that were running around in the underneath the surface, and some common people pleasing beliefs here are, well, if I say no, they'll leave. My needs don't matter. I can't handle disappointing others. And really, first, you need to ask yourself, where did I learn that? And is it still true now? Where did I learn that? And is it still true now? Most of these beliefs, by the way, came from earlier on in our life. I remember when I first started therapy and doing therapy, and did not want to believe that our childhood so impacted our adult life. And I can't tell you how true I find that now, for better, for worse. That's what I say. We're a product of our upbringing. Now, we still have a choice with what we do with it, meaning when we figure out where we learned it, and if it's still true now, which by the way, pretty much they never are, then we have to replace it with things like, I can handle temporary discomfort for long term peace. Or saying no allows me to say yes with my whole heart. And most of us, especially women, really do lead with our hearts or want to live a heart focused life. So if we can say no, it allows us to say yes. And it empowers your yes. Now, I work with couples, and as a sex therapist, a lot of times I do see women more often than men, not that men don't ever, but more often than men, just feel like they have to always say yes to sex with their husband, honestly, for a variety of reasons, which I'm not going to go down that path, but they just feel like they can't ever say no. And if you can't ever say no, what happens is that experience ends up taking from you, and then you don't look forward to it or you resent it rather than it being something that's enjoyable and connective and close. So we really have to move from, well, if I say no, they'll leave, to saying no allows me to say yes with my whole heart. And you can say yes with your whole heart. Now, friends, sometimes we need to practice saying no with confidence and calm. I often encourage women to go stand in front of the mirror and to practice saying no. No. No, thank you. Another time. By the way, just as a side note, sometimes women do this too. Not that men don't. Women tend to do it more, at least in my experience, where we'll say things like, oh, not right now, or I'm not interested. And it's almost like we sort of just leave the door open, where we really do need to close the door. And I get that really closing the door sometimes comes with time. So, what I'm going to ask you to do is to start small, to say no to the text invite that drains you. And you don't have to say NO, period. You can say, I can't commit to that right now, but I appreciate you thinking of me. Or right now, my time is focused elsewhere, things like that. You have to learn to use no as a complete sentence when needed. No, thank you. It means a lot to me that you would like for me to do that, but the answer is no. Um, and maybe in a different season of my life, I'll let you know if I'm interested. Yeah, we have to be able to say no. Say it calm, say it with a smile on our face. And I'm not talking about the place where we need these like absolute boundaries, absolutely no, that's a violation. I'm just talking about the stuff where it's like, I said yes, but I know I need to say no. And you can really reinforce safety in your body by using breath work, which is really just breathing, learning. There's so many great YouTubes on breath work, or grounding before, being present, noticing where you're at. One of my favorite tools is, and I'll talk about it a little bit in the next one, but is anchoring. It's an NLP skill where you can anchor in confidence to a place on your body by repetitively thinking about times when you felt confident. And then when you hit this anchor on your body, what happens is all of those feelings are flooded back if you do it really well. Anchoring is super cool. Maybe I need to do a YouTube video on that. No to self. Then you need to visualize. So maybe you've created this anchor. I hope that you have. And then you need to visualize this confident version of you, that you need to go out into the future. You need to see yourself saying no clearly, saying no confidently. Maybe you have a boss that keeps trying to add things to your plate and you just say yes because you think that that's what a good employee does. When in actuality, you're working way more hours than you need to work. You're doing way more than you need to be doing for at least a healthy version of you. And you need to be able to say no. I would love to do that for you, but right now my plate's really full. Sometimes it's choices. In order for me to say yes to that, I would need to take blank off my plate. Would you prefer that I do this or this? And even that awareness sometimes helps the people that are bringing things to you, because maybe they aren't trying to hurt you or be malicious in any way. You're just like the yes girl. So they're like, cool, I'm going to go ask my yes girl because she always says yes. I could do this or I can do this. Which one is most important to you? I want you to imagine coming back to seeing yourself say no clearly, saying no confidently. I want you to imagine how calm you'll feel when you've honored your own boundary. This is called future pacing, and it's a powerful way to prime your nervous system for success. The reason that it is because the brain doesn't know the difference in fantasy and reality. I know that's wild. And so when we imagine something on repeat, it actually helps us do it in the future versus imagining something negative on repeat. Like some of you do that struggle with anxiety. I have a podcast on that too I'll link that. And then I'm also going to link my podcast on boundaries. I think, as you think about saying no and not people pleasing, it's also important to really understand the role of boundaries. But I want to come back to this. You really need to visualize yourself saying no confidently and clearly, that you honor yourself, you honor what it is that you actually need for you. And by the way, the more you practice, the better you become at this. When you first decide, I am no longer people pleasing, it is clunky. It is messy. It doesn't feel right. You might even have some of those guilt and fear, anxious feelings leading up to it after you do it. And then you just need to affirm in yourself that you're choosing you, that I'm more important. I'm kind to myself when I say no. I'm actually taking care of me. And in order for me to take care of others well, I actually need to care for me. Sometimes we need to keep affirming the decision that we made over and over and over. I want you to, as you're really thinking about this, I want to encourage you to think through these questions. First, what am I afraid will happen if I say no? 2, where in my life have I been overextending myself to avoid rejection or guilt? What belief am I reinforcing when I say yes out of fear? What would be different if I believed that my boundaries were a form of love, particularly for self, but are of others as well? And what is one small no I can practice this week to honor myself? I encourage you to take action on that almost as immediately as you come up with it. Because when you take action, it communicates to your unconscious mind that you actually want what you say that you want. Friend, every time that you say yes out of fear, you reinforce a belief that you are not enough unless you are pleasing others. But every time you say no with confidence, you reinforce the belief that you are already enough, even when you disappoint someone. And that, my friend, is freedom. It lets you out of the cage of being trapped by other people's perceived opinions, because they might not even be actual. And it releases you to exist in the world as the best version of you, as the most aligned, most congruent version of you, that their yes can mean yes and their no can mean no. So, friend, it was wonderful being with you on this zippy episode, and I will see you next week.